Right. Labor, as we've been speaking about, is still in damage control after the RBA confirmed that budget spending of both state and federal governments was contributing to higher inflation. The PM denies that his budget had anything to do with it, but let's bring in now macro business chief economist Leith Van Onselen. Leith, great to see you. Look, there is this clear rift, this divergence in views between the RBA and the government on whether government spending, and it's not just federal, it's state as well, is contributing to keeping inflation high. Do you think the Albanese government has any leg to stand on when they disagree with the RBA?
No, I don't, Sharri. Look, to be honest with you, I think both the federal government and the state governments are working at cross purposes with the Reserve Bank. So obviously the Reserve Bank's trying to slow inflation through high interest rates, and we have the federal government working against that, obviously with its very high immigration policy, which they're running into a supply-constrained market, and that's pushing up, obviously, things like housing inflation and into inflation woes. We've also got, obviously, energy policy failures left, right and centre, which is pushing up gas and electricity prices. That's adding to cost of living and inflation across the economy. And finally, we've got their massive spending on things like the NDIS, which is obviously adding demand in the economy. And then we have the state governments, which are doing their big build infrastructure projects, often on, white elephant sort of projects like the suburban rail loop in Melbourne. And then that's adding demand to the economy. So we've got basically a burnout economy at the moment whereby the Reserve Bank's got the foot on the brake with interest rates, and all the governments have got the foot on the accelerator working at cross purposes, and we really need them to work together.
There's also been this debate about the energy subsidies. Clearly, they do lower that component of the CPI. However, the data shows that when they end, that inflation ticks back up again. So are you one of those economists who thinks this is a trick, or do you think it's really smart policy?
Look, it's a Band-Aid, to be quite frank. So basically, the subsidies on energy and rents, for that matter, are basically trying to paper over the cracks of the government's own failed policy. So if you look at energy, for example, the East Coast Australia is one of the biggest gas exporters in the world, but we're the only region in the world that doesn't have a gas reservation scheme. And as a result, we pay some of the highest gas prices in the world, and then that pushes up electricity. And instead of, addressing that problem at the source by implementing a domestic reservation scheme like we have in Western Australia, the federal government instead wants to spend our money to try and alleviate the cost pressures. And they're doing that also with the rental market. Instead of cutting immigration hard, which they should be, they're instead handing out subsidies. So it's really just a statistical trick, and it's not fixing the underlying problems.
How are we comparing in the inflation fight to other countries around the world at the moment?
Yeah, we're certainly running behind the other countries. So, if you look at, say, Canada or New Zealand, for example, their inflation is coming down faster than us. We're lagging them. So unfortunately, we do have domestically driven inflation. And again, some of that gets back to the federal government with its excessive immigration, energy policy failures, spending, etc., and the state governments.
Van Onselen, thank you very much for your analysis tonight. Now,